Hi, well, welcome to our third movie on how to read a comic. So far we've covered the idea that comics have certain codes and conventions or rules that help us to read and understand the text. The first set of codes we looked at were about the form and structure of the text. The key ideas were that comics are made of images that are presented in panels, which we read from left to right and down the page. Today we'll be having a look at the text features that appear within these panels. Most of us would be familiar with the speech or word balloons that enclose print text words within a visual boundary that divides artwork from the printed text. Speech balloons vary in size, shape and layout. The first example here shows how alternating speech bubbles are used to show a conversation. The shapes of the second images suggest that the speaker may be angry or yelling. And the third shows speech bubbles joined together to show two or more expressions of the same topic. Thought balloons show a character's feelings or thoughts. The reader understands that only they and the character are privy to that information. More recently, these thought balloons have been replaced in comics by internal monologue captions, which we'll talk about soon. A derivative of the thought balloon is the telepathy balloon. This can be sensed by other characters. Now, balloon tails point to the character who is speaking. They let the reader know who said what. Like speech balloons themselves, balloon tails come in many different sizes and designs. They can even show when someone is speaking from outside the frame. Okay, so the other form of text in a comic is caption boxes. Now these are rectangular or square boxes that contain information about a scene or a character, and they act kind of like a narrator. Caption boxes are used to progress the storyline. Now there are four broad types of captions. The first is location and time, which gives us the when and the where of the story. The second type of caption is the internal monologue, which largely replaces the thought balloons, and they're often in italics. Thirdly, spoken captions are used to give the speech of a character who's not in the panel, and they're usually given in quotation marks. The last sort of caption is the editorial caption. This is where the writer or narrator gives their opinion or more information about what is happening. Here we see them referring to a previous edition of the comic. Even though comics are an entirely visual medium, they still have sound effects. Sound effects are text in the panel that give the audience a sense of sounds that they might have heard in the story. The as Abraham Lincoln prepares to speak to the audience, or touch of the finger on the braces. Note also that the use of a caption to show the out-of-frame voice of the dentist in this panel. To heighten the impact of the sound effects, words are usually styled in a way that also conveys the intensity or properties of the noise. Looks like that braces fix was a little bit more than slight discomfort. And now for my favourite comic convention, Grawlixes. This is when a string of symbols is used to imply swearing. They're basically used to keep it G-rated, even when someone says $% When you think about it, it's amazing what people say in cartoons for kids and get away with it. Grawlixes are a really good example of how if you don't understand the conventions of a comic, you would have no idea what those symbols mean. If you didn't know they were called Grawlixes, the comic strip above would make no sense. So we've already seen a bit of graphically enhanced text earlier when we talked about sound effects, but basically this is when the words are given special graphical treatment to make them stand out on the page. This reinforces the impact of the words. Sometimes it's pretty obvious. But it's not always big bold colouring or font. This can also be the use of italics, which is that slopey writing used here to show text which is in a different language, or bold fonts or small symbols like the musical notes to help convey meaning to the reader. So that's the end of our lesson on text features terminology. Hopefully by now you're starting to see that comics are actually quite complicated texts and how the codes and conventions are being used to convey quite subtle meanings to the reader. The page here contains quite a few of the codes we covered today. I look forward to joining you for the fourth movie in our series, Framing and Design Terminology.